Lecture 4. The Rise of Nationalistic Ambitions. The French Revolution ended when, after seizing power, Napoleon Bonaparte declared himself Emperor of France. His nationalistic ambitions moved him to transform France into an empire that reached into Russia. Ultimately, he failed, and he died in lonely exile away from his country on St. Helena Island. The nationalistic fervor that he encouraged, though, did not die, but rather multiplied and manifested itself in various European countries. The Catholic Prince Clemens Wenzel von Metternich, who had once served as the foreign ministry of the Holy Roman Empire before it was dissolved by Napoleon, tried to stem the tide of nationalism that he believed was disintegrating Europe, leading to war. We will conclude this lecture with one style of art that is representative of these times, Impressionism. Napoleon's nationalistic and imperialistic ambitions. Before studying nationalism, in France, the term nationalism needs to be defined. In order to understand what nationalism is, though, the terms nation and state need to be defined. As I've explained in another course, a state in the sense of a politically sovereign state refers to a defined territory that is ruled by a government that has the power to legislate, enforce, and judge laws. A nation is comprised of a group of people who share significant characteristics. These characteristics may include ethnic, religious, linguistic, and historical components. A nation-state is a self-governing political entity that is united by a dominant national identity. According to this definition, not all sovereign states are nation-states, because it is possible to have multiple nations within a sovereign state. Such a state is a polyglot state and is made up by a number of large national groups. The former Yugoslavia was a polyglot state, which was a factor for its demise. In contrast, the Palestinians are a stateless nation since they have no land of their own and yet are a people. As a further contrast, the Cherokee Indian tribe is a nation with land of its own within the U.S. Now that nationalism has been defined, we will begin our study of nationalism with France. During the French Revolution, which we previously studied, nationalistic fervor led the French to war with their neighboring countries. One key military leader during the French Revolution was Napoleon Bonaparte, who, beginning as a lowly artillery officer, was quickly promoted as the supreme commander of the French military forces. Napoleon's ambition for leadership did not end with the military. He also wanted to be the supreme political leader of France and even of a French-controlled Europe. To achieve the first end, on November 9, 1799, Napoleon, with the backing of the military, overthrew the French government and was named First Consul of France. A few years later, Napoleon achieved, in part, his second end by crowning himself Emperor of France. In 1812, his ambitions were curtailed after he invaded Russia in retaliation for Russia's refusal to obey the French continental system. The continental system was directed against England, France's main rival. According to Napoleon's Berlin Decree of November 21, 1806, European countries that were under the control of France were prohibited from importing goods from England. As Article 2 of the Berlin Decree states, all commerce and correspondence with the British islands are prohibited. Since Russia refused to follow this decree, Napoleon invaded. Although Napoleon won his war with Russia, he in a certain sense lost because so many of his soldiers died during the severe Russian winter while at war with Russia. Taking advantage of France's demoralized and weakened military, Russia allied itself with a coalition that included England, Austria, Prussia, and a few other countries. The common goal of the coalition, named the Sixth Coalition, was to overthrow Napoleon and place someone else in the French throne. The War of the Sixth Coalition with France brought an end to Napoleon's rule. On April 11, 1814, Napoleon admitted defeat by signing the Treaty of Fontainebleau. According to Article 1 of the treaty, His Majesty the Emperor Napoleon renounces for himself, his successors and descendants as well, as for each of the members of his family, all right of sovereignty and domination, as well as over the French Empire and the Kingdom of Italy as over all other countries. The treaty also stipulated that Napoleon would leave France and live in exile on the island of Elba. With Napoleon safely in exile, the brother of King Louis XVI was named King of France as Louis XVIII. Remember that Louis XVI and his wife Queen Marie Antoinette were guillotined during the French Revolution. The naming of this brother as the King of France indicates yet another difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Unlike the French Revolution, U.S. Americans have never reverted back to being ruled by a king. During the turmoil of the French Revolution, and during Napoleon's reign, King Louis XVIII, the brother of King Louis XVI, had been in exile for 23 years in England, a country Napoleon hated. Once backed by the Sixth Coalition and named the French king, Louis XVIII was able to rule France until his death in 1824. For a brief time, though, he lost his power when Napoleon escaped from Elba, returned to France, raised an army, and ruled France for about 100 days. At the end of the 100 days, Napoleon was finally defeated by troops loyal to King Louis XVIII in the Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815. Once again, Napoleon was exiled, this time to the island of St. Helena. German patriotism and empire building. The Lutheran Prussian politician Otto von Bismarck successfully helped to navigate Prussia during a war with France from 1870 to 1871. At the conclusion of the war, a common national spirit among various German states was awakened. Building upon this German patriotism that transcended state boundaries, on January 18, 1871, Bismarck united various German states into a German empire that shortly was led by him as the Chancellor of the German Empire and by the King of Prussia as its Kaiser. Prior to the Unification from 1815 to 1866, German lands were part of a German confederation consisting of 39 states that were relatively autonomous from one another, with the Austrian Empire, a predominantly Catholic country, and remaining remnant of the former Holy Roman Empire, being the most dominant. Once he was Chancellor of the German Empire, Bismarck set about unifying his realm even further with his pro-Protestant Kulturkampf, which in German means struggle of culture. He believed that only a single Protestant-based culture could effectively unite Germans together as a single empire. Under his leadership of the Prussian Kulturkampf, Catholic religious orders were expelled from Prussia, state subsidies to the Catholic Church ended, Catholic seminaries were either closed or strictly regulated by the state. Catholic clergy's freedom of speech was greatly curtailed, especially from the pulpit, and Catholic bishops and priests were persecuted, imprisoned, or expelled, and decision of appointments of clerics was controlled by the state. Catholics reacted by peacefully forming a Catholic political party called the Centre Party, whose purpose was to resist further anti-Catholic legislation through parliamentary democratic means. Their efforts paid off, and around the beginning of the 19th century, when Bismarck, for political reasons, backed off from his anti-Catholic stance. Italian nationalism. At the time that patriotic fervor was uniting German, predominantly Protestant lands, Italian states were also advocating the creation of a single Italy. This trans-state nationalistic fervor also came at the expense of the Catholic Church. Prior to the unification of Italy, Italy was divided into the following states: Papal States, Kingdom of Sardinia, Republic of Venice, Republic of Genoa, Grand Duchy of Tuscany, and the Kingdom of Sicily. A 1796 map of these autonomous Italian states is depicted in your lecture transcript. In 1796, the above Italian political establishment changed when military forces of the French Revolution, led by Napoleon Bonaparte, invaded Italian states. In 1805, the year following his self-coronation as Emperor of the French, Napoleon was crowned in Milan as the King of Italy. A few years later, in 1809, Napoleon annexed to France the large swath of central Italian lands called the Papal States. When Napoleon lost the war with the Sixth Coalition in 1814, his ambition to establish a vast empire came to an end. After Napoleon's loss, an international political assembly called the Congress of Vienna attempted to re-establish the Italian states according to the state boundaries of 1796. The invasion of French troops and their occupation of Italian lands, along with a number of other factors, helped to awaken in some and intensify in others a desire for one united Italy. The principal leaders behind the Italian unification movement were Giuseppe Mazzini, Count of Cavour, Giuseppe Garibaldi, and King Victor Emmanuel II. Giuseppe Mazzini promoted Italian unification with his writings and political activism. The Count of Cavour put his leadership role as Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Piedmont Sardinia at the service of the unification efforts. The Sardinian King Victor Emmanuel II also backed the goal of unification with his leadership. Not surprisingly, when Italy did become united, Victor Emmanuel II became United Italy's first king. None of these leaders' efforts would have been successful without the backing of military might that General Giuseppe Garibaldi provided. General Garibaldi was also from Sardinian territory, specifically Nice, that you can see in the map provided in the transcript. As is evident in the map, the 1814-1815 Congress of Vienna gave Nice to Sardinia. After a series of battles in 1861, a unified Kingdom of Italy was officially proclaimed with Rome as its capital. Establishing Rome as the capital was not yet possible, though, since a French garrison was stationed in 1861 in Rome in order to protect the papacy from the Italian unification movement and to prevent these Italians from seizing Rome. Circumstances quickly changed when in 1870, the French garrison was called back to France in order to fight against Bismarck's Prussian forces. Once this occurred, the Italians, in support of unification, quickly captured Rome on September 20th, 1870, and took control over what remained of the Papal States. From that September day, the popes were considered prisoners of the Vatican and remained in this secluded state for 59 years. The self-imposed papal imprisonment came to an end in 1929 with the signing of the Lateran Treaty on February 11th. The Lateran Treaty established the autonomous Vatican City state that the current pope lives in and rules over today. The signees of the treaty were the Italian Prime Minister and head of government Benito Mussolini and the Vatican Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Cardinal Gaspari on behalf of Pope Pius XI. Austria and Metternich's anti-nationalism. In the section on Germany, Bismarck was described as leading the predominantly Protestant Prussian German state to prominence and uniting together a coalition of German states. Prior to the rise of Protestant Prussia, the predominantly Catholic land of Austria had been considered the leader of the relatively autonomous 39 German states. Austria's prominence ended during the Battle of Königgrätz that was at the tail end of the 1866 War of Austria against Prussia. After Prussia once again emerged victorious on January 18, 1871 in its Franco-Prussian War, Bismarck united Prussian-friendly German states into a German empire in which Austria was excluded. As early as 1819, Austria opposed the nationalistic unification movement spearheaded by Prussia. In 1819, the Austrian Catholic minister Prince Clemens Wenzel von Metternich issued the Carlsbad Decrees that restricted Austrians from publicly advocating nationalistic unification. Prior to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire in 1806 by Napoleon Bonaparte, Metternich had served as an ambassador for the Holy Roman Empire. In the service of this Catholic empire, Metternich came to see the Holy Roman Empire as playing a key role in checking both the interests of small nationalities advocating statehood and trans-state nationality advocating a unification among various states. For this reason, as the Austrian minister, Metternich opposed nationalities within Austria, such as, to name a few, Serbs, Croatians, Slovaks, Hungarians, that wanted to be recognized as states. He also opposed both Italian unification and German unification efforts. If these micro and macro nationalistic desires remained unchecked, he feared war would result. One of his first official ways as chair of the Congress of Vienna, where he demonstrated his anti-nationalism, was by defending traditional boundaries previously defined by monarchies. Under his leadership, as mentioned briefly before in reference to this Congress, boundaries that were disrupted under Napoleon as Emperor of France were restored. Unknown to Metternich, the main countries and empires represented at this Congress would later divide into two camps that would eventually fight each other during World War I. The leading countries and empires were the Austrian Empire, its rival state Prussia, Great Britain, and the Russian Empire. In November of 1815, these powers reaffirmed their quadruple alliance. After their first meeting in 1818, the four powers agreed to add France, thereby forming a five-member alliance. In time, the common goal of maintaining what has been called the harmonious concert of Europe was replaced by two rival camps within the alliance. These two camps split to form the Triple Alliance of 1882 and the Entente Powers, formed around 1907. Members of the Triple Alliance were the German Empire, under Prussian leadership in 1871, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, formed in 1867, and Italy. Members of the Entente Power were Britain, France, and the Russian Empire. These two rival groups of the Triple Alliance and the Entente Power set the stage for World War I, which lasted from 1914 to 1918. In the midst of this tension, war broke out. World War I. This war brought a decisive end to four empires: Austro-Hungarian, German, Ottoman, and Russian. Impressionism. A number of overlapping artistic movements were present during the rise of European nationalism and unification, including but not limited to neoclassicism, romanticism, realism, impressionism, and so-called post-impressionism and neo-impressionism. Since we have already covered neoclassicism and romanticism as a kind of revolutionary reaction to neoclassicism, we will briefly take a look at Impressionism and its related styles. When we cover the Industrial Revolution in the next lecture, we will examine the art of realism as an expression of changing social realities brought upon by this factory-based revolution. A common characteristic of art classified as impressionistic is its blurry quality, as if the artists only want to capture what our human mind vaguely processes when given a quick glimpse of something. Perhaps this art appealed to people's sense of their social environment, that due to nationalistic fervor was in a constant state of flux, causing life itself to seem blurry, up in the air, and uncertain. The style name of Impressionism came about after the French painter Claude Monet exhibited a painting that, according to some reports, was simply numbered 98. Monet eventually chose to title number 98 Impression Sunrise. The first word of the title was picked up by art critics, and after much use of the term, a wide variety of paintings from various artists were categorized as impressionistic. We've already mentioned Claude Monet, his Impression Sunrise. He also painted beautiful water lilies. Another impressionistic French painter is Edouard Manet, and a Danish French impressionist artist was Camille Pissarro from the same time. Pierre-Auguste Renoir is another French impressionist. Edgar Degas, he's known for his painting of ballet and creating a sense of intimacy rarely seen previously in art. Impressionism is directly related to two other styles that were part of the overall movement of Impressionism. Post-Impressionism is distinguished from Impressionism not by its placement in time, as is evident in the chart provided in your transcript, but rather by the various distinct ways of expressing Impressionism, such as using colors that are not associated with what is being depicted, or in the case of Seurat, painting with thousands of small points or using perspective in a unique way. Vincent van Gogh. Below in your transcript are a few works from the Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. Notice the emotionally charged nature of his painting The Starry Night and The Red Vineyard. It is as if he painted the sky and the vineyard to express his struggle with mental illness, which sadly ended in suicide. According to the art historian Willem Klaas, The Starry Night is often understood as a precursor of Expressionism, a style you will be introduced to in the next lecture. Paul Gauguin is a French artist who has also been classified as post-impressionist. Paul Cézanne, likewise a French artist, has been categorized as post-impressionist. And Georges Seurat, who we've already mentioned before, with his technique of pointillism, is another example of Impressionism. God bless.